In today's culture, black cats, the number 13, and holding your breath while going by a graveyard are common superstitions that most people may not believe but are familiar with.
Many superstitions people generally think are true, whereas more skeptical people think that these stories are merely old wives' tales and are not true at all.
This video introduces you to superstitions in Bram Stoker's novel Dracula, 1897, by going through the 6 steps of CRIT. CRIT stands for Close Reading Interpretative Tool. This process helps readers to provide a closer reading of a passage and understand a certain passage better. The 6 steps of CRIT are paraphrase, observe, contextualize, analyze, argue, and reflect.
In this book, we might think of, what are the text's universal themes? How does this affect my personal life? What does this book add or boil down to?
Let's start by reading the passage. It is the eve of St. George's Day. Do you not know that tonight, when the clock strikes midnight, all the evil things in the world will be in full sway? Do you know where you were going and what you were going to? She was in such evident distress that I tried to comfort her, but without effect. Finally, she went down on her knees and implored me not to go, at least to wait a day or two before starting. It was all very ridiculous, but I did not feel comfortable. However, there was business to be done, and I could not allow anything to interfere with it. I tried to raise her up, and said, as gravely as I could, that I thanked her, but my duty was imperative, and that I must go. She then rose and dried her eyes, and taking a crucifix from her neck, offered it to me. I did not know what to do, for as an English churchman I had been taught to regard such things as in some measure idolatrous, and yet it seemed so ungracious to refuse an old lady meaning so ill and in such a state of mind. She saw, I suppose, the doubt in my face, for she put the rosary around my neck and said, for your mother's sake, and went into the room. I am writing up this part of the diary whilst I am waiting for the coach, which is, of course, late, and the crucifix is still round my neck. Whether it is the old lady's fear or the many ghostly traditions of this place, or the crucifix itself, I do not know, but I am not feeling nearly as easy on my mind as usual. If this book should ever reach me now before I do, let it bring my goodbye. Here comes the coach. Paraphrasing asks you to summarize the passage, determining who the speaker is, what the speaker is saying, and what happens from the beginning, middle, and end. First off, the speaker, Jonathan Harker, experiences an old lady begging him not to leave, saying that it is the eve of St. George's Day, and at midnight all evil things will be in full sway. Witnesses the old lady in such evident distress, but says he has to leave for work, and encounters the old lady pulling out a crucifix, putting it around his neck, and saying, for your mother's sake.
The next step is observe. This is where you look for important details in the text other than what the passage is actually saying. To start, the reader looks for textual elements such as word repetition, word choice, changes in vocabulary, or descriptive detail. This is the time to highlight, underline, and bullet the passage with a lot of observations. Even though the passage is 15 sentences, half of it is conversation between the old lady and Jonathan Harker, which is highlighted in green. Also, the way the mood changes when the old lady puts a crucifix around Jonathan's neck, which is highlighted in pink. The repetition of the word crucifix, it repeats the word 3 times, which is highlighted in red. The way Jonathan feels throughout the passage, which is highlighted in blue. And finally, the word choice throughout the whole passage. It was tense the whole time, which is highlighted in purple.
The next step is step 3, contextualize. We will consider context from the passage. Context are facts that are important to its production or understanding. We will look at the historical and biographical features of the book. In the case of the scene when Jonathan Harker receives a crucifix from an old lady in chapter 1, we might think about the talismans that were commonly used to ward off evil in Eastern European cultures. Likewise, we might consider how these talismans were worn and why they were used. Bram Stoker, the author of the novel Dracula, was told scary stories by his mother when he was little, which could have had an effect on how he wrote his book.
Next is step 4, analyze. This step asks us to review the features and context we identified in steps 2 and 3 as being potentially significant, and then to explain how each is in fact significant. Here we'll ask which of these features and context seem somehow connected, in what way. Once we've picked at least 4 textual elements and/or contextual frames, we'll make analytical claims about their significance. For instance, we could claim that half the passage is conversation between the old lady and Jonathan, which conveys where Jonathan is going, is ominous due to her evident distress and all the questions she asked. We could also claim that the mood changes when the old lady puts a crucifix around Jonathan's neck helps to explain that the old lady is concerned for what's to come. Additionally, we might claim that the repetition of the word crucifix conveys the importance of the beliefs of the crucifix. Finally, We might claim that the way Jonathan feels throughout the passage illustrates how uncomfortable he was when the old lady was talking to him.
Having made all of the analytical claims, we can now offer an interpretation of the passage as a whole. In Step 5 Argue, we are asked to write one paragraph that builds upon our responses to Step 4 Prompt, and all of our work in the previous steps. Here is one such argument. Bram Stoker's first chapter describes an odd and uneasy encounter with an old lady in Transylvania. But in its 15 sentences, this passage conveys Bram Stoker's superstitious beliefs in Romanian folklore. Stoker's passage contrasts in tone, diction, and content contributes to the passage's implicit argument that superstitions are real.
The last step of the crit process is Step 6. We will reflect on the interpretation that we've just advanced. We should ask, what aspects of the passage remain confusing? What elements does your interpretation neglect or set aside? What parts of our argument now appear debatable or dubious? That is, what objections could a reasonable person raise about our interpretation? A. How did the old lady know what Jonathan Harker was about to experience? B. Why did Jonathan Harker not listen to the old lady's warnings? C. That superstitions might not be real. And D. That no superstitions are real and talismans are fake.